Live from Washington, D.C., Jay Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow.
We are aggressively pursuing the defense of life, and we saw the aggressiveness of our legal team pay off. We got an order from HHS. They've issued an order to the University of Vermont where they have really put the University of Vermont on notice that they have violated, through the Office of Civil Rights, our clients' constitutional rights and others as well. It ended up not just being our client. We had others that we referred. But I want to say what this is. Could you imagine forced abortion coercion participation? In other words, you are being compelled as a healthcare professional to participate in an abortion procedure. That's what this is. Forced compulsion into abortion procedures when you're known to have a moral and religious objection. There is a doctrine, it's a law, church amendment, church law, and it's been on the books, as Cece said earlier, and I'm going to have her say it again, since 1973. What does the law say?
Yes, so since 1973, it says, no entity which receives a grant, contract loan, or loan guarantee under the Public Health Service Act after June 18, 1973, may discriminate in the employment, promotion, or termination of employment of any physician or other healthcare personnel, or discriminate in extension of staff or other privileges to any physician or other healthcare personnel because of his religious beliefs or moral convictions respecting sterilization procedures or abortions. So that's been June 18th, 1973, and we've never seen it enforced until today. So we talked about this is just the tip of the iceberg. I know that there are a lot of nurses, doctors that have been forced, coerced into performing abortions against their moral objections because the hospitals have not been complying with this, although they've been getting taxpayer money all along.
I will tell you this. This is a huge victory. We're going to be joined by Frank Mannion. He was on earlier. But this was a big victory with big findings. I mean, the HHS to say our clients' rights were violated, but the hospital risks $500,000 a year in federal funding over this.
Yeah, you know what I'd love to hear from, if you're out there. I know a lot of people are listening. They're getting up to date on this. This is groundbreaking. HHS has never taken action like this. HHS, we've talked about in the past, has been one of the federal bureaucracies that I think has been most hostile, especially their bureaucrats, to the pro-life position. Remember, they were the administrators. They are the administrators of the Affordable Care Act, which Planned Parenthood was the only outside group in the room when the Affordable Care Act and the provisions on abortion funding were being drafted. It was the Obama administration plus Planned Parenthood. No one else was allowed in that room. So they've been extremely hostile to life. From Republican administration to Democrat administration, the bureaucracy there has really ruled. No more Undersecretary Azar and President Trump and Vice President Pence, who've put in a pro-life message. Remember, from the very top, HHS said, we are now going to defend life at conception. They've changed their entire policy at HHS. We're now seeing that come into reality. Remember when HHS announced that? We're now defining life and our role as protecting life from conception through birth, through your entire life. That's the role of HHS. And now you're starting to see a broad policy position like that, which is very pro-life, into action. Folks, this is an ACLJ victory because of your support. It took about 16 months. That's quick for the federal government. But it took us filing the complaint with HHS, knowing in the past this was an uphill battle. HHS doing the investigation, finding that nurses who are federally protected by law not to have to perform abortions were being forced to perform abortions by taxpayer-funded university hospitals, in this case, Vermont. And it wasn't just our client that HHS found after doing the review. It was many other nurses and medical professionals who were being forced. They weren't even told what they were about to have to do until they were in the room. And the doctors would say things like, don't hate me for doing this to you. Well, these schools are in real trouble now. Their federal funding is in jeopardy. That means the money your taxpayer dollars go to. We need your support.
And standing up for life makes a huge difference. You saw it right here. We always have a petition up defending life. We encourage you to do it. We also encourage you to support the work of the ACLJ. You see victories like this. You could do that at aclj.org. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
Pro-life doctors and nurses are being pressured and even forced into assisting in abortions. Pharmacists are targeted for refusing to dispense abortion pills. The right of conscience, the right not to violate one's faith, is one of the most sacred rights we all possess. Federal laws protect medical professionals and religious hospitals from being forced to violate their faith, but many times these federal laws are ignored or unenforced. At the ACLJ, we're defending doctors, nurses, and other medical professionals. We filed formal public comments supporting a new federal rule ensuring that conscience rights will be protected and that entities that force medical professionals to perform or assist in abortions will lose federal taxpayer funding. But now the radical left and the abortion industry are filing lawsuits to overturn this rule. Sign on today to our petition to stop doctors and nurses from being forced to perform abortions. Add your name online, aclj.org.
Well, big win out of Health and Human Services. And we're going to have Frank Mannion come on. But before I have Frank come on, I'm going to go play for you. This is what the Secretary of Health and Human Services has said about the pro-life position. This is when we talk about elections having consequences. Here's one. Take a listen.
Let me be really clear. President Trump, Vice President Pence, and I are part of a pro-life administration. We stand for protecting the sanctity of human life from conception until natural death. Part of that is this regulation you mentioned that we put out that prevents these Title X family planning monies from going to supporting the abortion enterprise. For too long, that money has been used to subsidize the provision of abortion.
There you have it. I mean, that's your HHS secretary. It's pretty refreshing, I have to say. Frank Mannion, senior counsel for the ACLJ. Frank, how did this case start?
Case started, Jay, by this nurse in Vermont contacting us. Actually, she was referred to us by a doctor at UVMMC. We went up and met with her, Jeff Surtees and I, and we've made several trips up there as part of this investigation and part of our investigation. And we were obviously aware of the existence of the Office of Civil Rights, especially the new Conscience and Religious Freedom Division that was created in January of 2018. So we filed a complaint that you've already showed the viewers and talked about with the listeners. It's been a while. I can say this, there's not too much I can say about the investigation. We weren't privy to all parts of their investigation, but it was an extremely thorough, painstaking investigation. Jeff and I sat in a room a couple weeks ago where 3 seasoned attorneys from the Department of Health and Human Services grilled our client for over 5 hours about every aspect of her story, up and down, left and right, trying to make sure that they, were on solid ground in what they've done today. And that was in addition to a 2.5-hour telephone interrogation that they had conducted over previously. And after they spoke to our client, they went and interviewed, it's my understanding, approximately a half dozen other UVMMC employees. They have solid grounds for what they've done today, and we're just thrilled that finally somebody is enforcing the Church Amendment.
Well, the Church Amendment's been around since, CC, you were saying this, since 1973.
1973, so this is nothing new. Except
it's never been applied.
Enforced, ever.
Yeah, this is the irony of this is, you say all these administrations, Democrats, Republicans, nobody enforced this, Frank.
Nope, nobody. And, that's what I was echoing what Jordan was saying earlier. We have filed complaints with HHS over the years, and we didn't, after a while we realized they weren't going to go anywhere. We've even tried to bring causes of action in lawsuits that we filed, but because the Church Amendment, it can't be enforced privately. There's no private right of action. We've always been shot down. This is what we need to have done, and today it's being done.
I'll tell you this. So look, this is a major victory. A really significant victory for our clients and for the life cause, and there's no question about it. But, Cece, I want you to reiterate a point and then get Frank to comment on this. The thing that it's all shocking, but what's really shocking is they have this list of people that have conscience objections,
yes,
and they ignore it. Absolutely. Not only ignore it, you say intentionally.
Not only ignore it, I'd say they actually use it to see now who has an objection to performing an abortion. Those are the people that we are going to force to participate in abortion against their moral objection that we have on record. And we have other people that can do it. All
right, so Frank, let me read. This is one of the findings from HHS. University of Vermont Medical Center intentionally, unnecessarily, and knowingly scheduled nurses or other healthcare personnel who have religious or moral objections to abortion to assist with abortion. That's what Cece was just talking about. Explain to everybody what that actually means.
I can give you some more insight on that from our client's own statements that she gave to HHS. At this hospital, each day the managers would sit down towards the end of the day and schedule the next day's procedures. Okay, there were people on the nursing staff who preferred not to work on certain kinds of cases for strictly medical reasons. They didn't feel as proficient in vascular surgery, let's say, or they preferred to work later in the day. Never were those people scheduled for the thing that they said they didn't feel comfortable doing. But frequently, very frequently, the people who were on the conscientious objector list for abortions found themselves, when they showed up for work the next day, on the board, scheduled to go into an abortion procedure in, let's say, 15 minutes. And that puts them in the most difficult situation of having to go hat in hand to their boss and try to get their boss to accommodate their religious beliefs. And that's got to stop. And we think that's what HHS really is getting angry about here.
Frank, what was the time frame of this? I mean, people need to understand how long, it moved actually for government. This moved very quickly. This was a lot of work by you and your team to get this thing to this point, to get this case to this point.
I mean, we were first contacted in April of 2018, and we filed this complaint in May. But just reading what HHS has issued today, they were doing a lot of things behind the scenes that we didn't know about. Yep. It's not their role to tell everybody what they're doing. We knew certain things they would do when they would want to speak with our client. We provided them with some names of other nurses, and I believe those are some of the nurses we see referred to in what they've issued today. So, I'm impressed with the investigation that they did, the parts of it that we were privy to, and I'm sure that the parts that we weren't privy to were just as thorough. And they weren't going to go off here, without making sure they had all their I's dotted and T's crossed. And I'm happy to see that's what they've done.
I mean, as Frank said, HHS found that there were a number of healthcare personnel there, at least since the spring of 2017, who intentionally, unnecessarily, and knowingly were scheduled by the University of Vermont Medical Center to assist with elective abortions, so abortions for no health reason whatsoever, against their known moral or religious objections. So it wasn't just our client. Our client helped lead the charge at this one hospital, but what HHS found was that this was going on widespread with the nurses and medical staff.
And this is a huge issue, folks, and a huge win. Your support of the ACLJ and standing up for life makes a huge difference. You saw it right here. We always have a petition up defending life. We encourage you to do it. We also encourage you to support the work of the ACLJ. You see victories like this. You could do that at aclj.org. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
Pro-life doctors and nurses are being pressured and even forced into assisting in abortions. Pharmacists are targeted for refusing to dispense abortion pills. The right of conscience, the right not to violate one's faith, is one of the most sacred rights we all possess. Federal laws protect medical professionals and religious hospitals from being forced to violate their faith, but many times these federal laws are ignored or unenforced. At the ACLJ, we're defending doctors, nurses, and other medical professionals. We filed formal public comments supporting a new federal rule ensuring that conscience rights will be protected and that entities that force medical professionals to perform or assist in abortions will lose federal taxpayer funding. But now the radical left and the abortion industry are filing lawsuits to overturn this rule. Sign on today to our petition to stop doctors and nurses from being forced to perform abortions. Add your name online, aclj.org.
When a woman gets pregnant, their motherly instincts just kick right into gear. It's how we're wired, it's how we're created, and I short-circuited mine.
I still remember staring up at that bright light and counting backwards from 10.
It was very, very painful. I've never felt pain like that in my life. I remember the nurse giving me sedation, and she just kept rubbing my arm, shushing me.
I didn't want anyone to see me. I didn't want anyone to know. They don't let you walk back out the front. There's a private exit. And later on in life, I wondered, had I seen someone like me in the state I was in at that moment after that abortion walk back out the front clinic, maybe I wouldn't have done it.
We're talking about a huge win at the ACLJ, and this, of course, was on this pro-life issue against the University of Vermont, forced coercion, abortion participation. Frank Mannion's a senior counsel with the ACLJ. He's back on the phone with us. He's handled this case. I got a call that's coming, and we want to get right to, Frank. I think this would be a good way to start this segment off. Let's take it.
Yeah, Mark is calling from Missouri. I think it's a great question. Mark, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live. You're on the air.
Hi, Mark.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I love what you guys do.
Thanks.
My question, could this be retroactively enforced? I'm sure they violated this law years previously, and I'm sure there are people who would complain about it.
Well, I think it's an interesting question. So, Frank, you look at this. We said this law's been on the books since 1973. It's really never been enforced until now. This administration's enforcing it, but it does take lawyers like the ACLJ, your team, our teams here, to move this forward. I mean, in a sense, it's all retroactive because these are situations that already happened.
Exactly right, Jay. And there's language in what HHS has done today, talking about requiring the university to come into compliance, but also say there's language about remedying past violations. Now, what HHS exactly means by that, we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But it does certainly seem to us that they have left the door open for going after past violations, however they're going to do that.
Yeah, I want to ask our Director of Policy, Harry Hutchinson. You look at this from a policy perspective. We have a law that's been on the books, Harry, since 1973, before I was practicing law. And it's been on the books, not really enforced. Now we get not only an enforcement, but a unbelievable finding. How significant do you think this is?
Well, I think it's very, very significant, but it also points out a particularly important fact. And that fact is it's very, very important to have an administration that is willing to enforce the law. In virtually every other area of non-discrimination, government agencies have aggressively enforced the law, but not with respect to conscience and not with respect to religious and moral objections. So it's very, very important that over time, we consider amending this law to provide a private right of action that would lead to greater enforcement down the road.
That's a good point. A private right of action would be a good way to handle it. Yeah.
But I think what's strong here, and what the caller was getting to, is that one, we're protecting the employment now of these nurses. I think they now know, under at least this HHS, if you have felt like this has happened to you and you're out there and you're listening to this broadcast right now, and like these other nurses that started talking to the investigators from HHS who went up to the hospital, you know that your job won't be in jeopardy by complaining about this, by filing this complaint, because the law is on your side. And then part two, the funding for the entire medical center will be in question and under serious review if they don't come up with a very quick new compliance rule within 30 days. And if they don't, HHS says, we're forwarding this over to our administrators. Your funding's basically going to be cut. And for the last 3-year period, which you've been doing for a number of decades, you got, it was a $1.6 million. So whatever you relied on there is not going to be there for you. But as Frank said, they also noted that part of this will be to take, quote, immediate steps to remedy the effect of its past discriminatory conduct. And I wonder if that gets to what Harry's talking about as well, that there is some kind of right that can be protected where you somehow try to make whole, even though it's impossible when you force someone to take part in an abortion procedure, somehow compensate these nurses who have been forced to do this in violation of the law.
Yeah, so what is the remedy here for them, in a sense? I mean, they're vindicated. This won't happen again. I don't know if our client still works there or not. What's the situation for them, Frank?
Well, I mean, there are possible causes of action that they would have, Jay. I can say that in our client's case, she has chosen, as you can tell, she's chosen to remain anonymous. Yep. She's trying to move on with her life. She's not particularly interested in pursuing that sort of litigation because you can just imagine it. She would be re-traumatized by having to go through the whole
100%.
thing, through the process of litigation. So we're respecting that. But in theory, and we did over the course of the past year and a half talk to her about pursuing possible remedies. So there are civil remedies that could be pursued if an individual was willing to do that, and we'd certainly be interested in talking to anybody about those possibilities because they definitely exist.
But for
one thing, you have Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. This is religious discrimination.
Well, they did find it to be religious discrimination. It was a moral and religious conscience objection. CC, you find that the most difficult or the most shocking aspect of this is that they had people ready to go that they intentionally knew that these individuals objected.
They did it intentionally. That it blows my mind. It wasn't just, oh, we just didn't have anybody else, or we forgot you were on a list, or it won't happen again. We're so sorry. They literally targeted these nurses and medical professionals, targeted them for their moral objection and intentionally forced them to perform an abortion.
I want you to put on, Wes, you're of course, military guy, and you're a senior military analyst here at the ACLJ, but you're also a pastor. Frank just said something to me is very important, that the trauma that these individuals went through as people.
Yes, absolutely. My wife is a surgery nurse. And what happened in Vermont happens in other places. This happened to her, where she was brought into a case, not told in advance that it was an elective abortion. And when she asked to be relieved, her supervisor refused to release her. She was traumatized, found it horribly offensive. This actually happens. And the thing about the determination letter by HHS is that they said this is not only discriminatory, but motivated by discriminatory intent.
Yeah.
They targeted these people. They showed flagrant disdain for their moral and religious objections.
But your wife experienced this.
She did. And she is still bothered by it to this day, that she was forced to participate in killing an unborn child.
Frank, are we at the tip of the iceberg here?
Oh, definitely, Jay. And I echo what Wes was just talking about. In technical terms, our client has said it wasn't until after she had scrubbed into the procedure that she was told what the procedure was. And as she put it, once I'm scrubbed in, if I leave that room, it's considered patient abandonment. I'll definitely be fired, and I probably lose my license to be a nurse. So that's the dilemma they put these people in, knowingly and intentionally, as HHS has found.
I want to say something here, Jordan. You said this, we said it reminds us of the Tea Party cases in a sense, where we had, first it was, within a couple of days this happened. We had 1 or 2, then 10, then 40. Yeah. It just it mushroomed exponentially in minutes or days.
There's a way to contact us at aclj.org.
Yep.
So if you are a medical professional, it wasn't just nurses that were found to be having their rights violated by HHS, but other medical professionals at the University of Vermont Medical Center. So if you are someone who's been in a similar situation, and as you can see, you can remain anonymous. We can represent you, and through this complaint process through HHS, you can remain anonymous. You can continue your employment so it doesn't put your employment in jeopardy. But if this has happened to you, where you've been pressured into carrying out a procedure against your religious conscience, like abortion, or being part of that procedure, not being told what you were even going to be doing, all of that, you need to contact us, the American Center for Law and Justice. It's important that we hear from more of you. And I have a feeling we're going to be hearing from a lot more of you as well, especially now that you can remain anonymous. We're keeping our client anonymous here. You can file the complaint. HHS keeps it anonymous. The school keeps it anonymous. The university hospital keeps it anonymous. So we want to hear from you if you have been in this situation before. And even the idea that you could be put in this situation before would violate HHS policy. So an employer telling you, well, we can't hire you if you're not going to perform abortions, that would also violate the HHS policies. So contact us through aclj.org. We have a contact legal help section, and it's a great place to go. Again, we respond to everybody. We've got attorneys ready for you.
So let me tell you what's happened here. Just give you the context. So we had a client who objected, was put in this horrible situation, forced to participate in an abortion. She objected, but there was not the procedure. And again, I think it's very important for Frank to underscore this. Frank underscored that the procedure, basically, she was scrubbed in. So you ran all kind of risks if she would have walked out at that point.
Yeah, I mean, she could not walk out of that room without losing her license and definitely losing her job. And she asked someone who did not object, who was perfectly able to step into her place to do it, and she simply refused. And it was all because this was part of what our client, I think, rightly has called a systemic disdain for conscience rights at UVMMC. And she puts it perfectly that way. That's exactly what we're talking about here. This was not just her. It was anybody who was pro-life was looked down upon, made fun of, and assigned procedures that they consider to be the equivalent of taking a human life.
I'll tell you what you've got here, just so everybody understands what we're dealing with, and I think this is very, very important to understand. This is a defense of life. This is a HHS pro-life administration that made a big difference here because, as everybody said, this law has been on the books for, since 1973. I don't recall it. I'm trying to rack my brain. Harry, has it ever? I don't ever recall it being applied like this.
The statute, the church amendment, has been honored in the breach. In other words, it has remained virtually unenforced by all administrations prior to this one, Democrat and Republican.
All right, that's going to do it for the broadcast today. What a significant victory. We want to thank you for allowing us to do this kind of work. Without your support, we don't get to do it. You've made a huge difference. Again, I encourage you to continue to support the work of the ACLJ. You can do that at aclj.org. Sign on to our petition to defend life. We're seeing these victories. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, win. Second Circuit, win. Supreme Court, win. And now HHS, another huge victory. Again, support the work of the ACLJ at aclj.org. We'll talk to you next time.
Pro-life doctors and nurses are being pressured and even forced into assisting in abortions. Pharmacists are targeted for refusing to dispense abortion pills. The right of conscience, the right not to violate one's faith, is one of the most sacred rights we all possess. Federal laws protect medical professionals and religious hospitals from being forced to violate their faith. But many times these federal laws are ignored or unenforced. At the ACLJ, we're defending doctors, nurses, and other medical professionals. We filed formal public comments supporting a new federal rule ensuring that conscience rights will be protected and that entities that force medical professionals to perform or assist in abortions will lose federal taxpayer funding. But now the radical left and the abortion industry are filing lawsuits to overturn this rule. Sign on today to our petition to stop doctors and nurses from being forced to perform abortions. Add your name online, aclj.org.
When a woman gets pregnant, their motherly instincts just kick right into gear. It's how we're wired, it's how we're created, and I short-circuited mine.
I still remember staring up at that bright light and counting backwards from 10.
It was very, very painful. I've never felt pain like that in my life. I remember the nurse giving me sedation, and she just kept rubbing my arm, shushing me.
I didn't want the baggage because I had a vision for my life, and it didn't include children.
When I found myself pregnant, Roe v. Wade had just happened. It was all in the news. I called my doctor. He said, no problem. We can take care of it.
I was told that it was just a blob of tissue. I wasn't given any choices as far as ultrasounds or why don't you go home, think about it, and then come back. Nothing like that. There was nothing positive.
When I stood up, and I fainted. I think I fainted because of the horror of what I had done. I realized that I was missing a large part of me.
I actually ended up being pretty volatile and got a little physical with the nurse. I didn't want anyone to see me. I didn't want anyone to know. They don't let you walk back out the front. There's a private exit. And later on in life, I wondered, had I seen someone like me in the state I was in at that moment after that abortion walk out, back out the front clinic, maybe I wouldn't have done it.